Welcome to the Lead Defend podcast, a show designed to help you grow in faith and leadership as you navigate the stages of young adulthood. We address important faith topics and provide practical life tips, helping you build up your faith as you engage a changing culture. Now, here are your hosts.
Hey, this is Ryan and Brock. We're here with Chris Roller. It's an exciting day. We're actually recording live at the Arkansas Baptist State Convention, which doesn't mean much to anybody listening.
It just means that you're working. You have to say that so people know you're working.
Yes, that's
you're
right.
Here.
Hey, speaking of work, the guy we're interviewing today, Chris Roller, happens to be your boss,
He
Brock.
is. I know.
Yes, and it's almost bonus season too.
It
Oh,
is.
really?
Can I have a raise?
Yeah. So how do you go about officially asking for a raise, or do you ask?
Are you asking Brock this? You asking me this?
I think I'm just throwing it out there, seeing how you respond.
I'll let the person higher up on the hierarchy answer that question.
I tell you what, let me figure it out first, and I'll get back with you on that one.
There we
Because
go.
Well, here's what's really funny, and I only saw this through social media. First Baptist Rogers posted a video of Brock a couple
Yes.
weeks back where Brock just announced himself for promotion on stage on a Sunday morning.
actually, if you want to see that, go to FBC Rogers on Instagram. Watch that video because he straight up did it.
So here's what happened. Is my title got changed.
Okay.
I used to be the student associate pastor. And so I think when I was announcing my title, because I preach every other week at Elevate, some people don't know who I am. I think I started to say student associate pastor, and then I tried to switch and say middle school pastor, and it came out as student pastor.
Which would leave Chris jobless.
Pretty much, yes.
No,
Yes.
he's always got a job there somewhere.
Interesting. Well, hey, Chris, you're a man of many hobbies. Not only are you a student pastor, you're an avid Razorbacks fan. You rarely miss a game.
Right.
And the Hogs are on the rise. That's a good thing.
We have the first 4 games for sure.
We have
we're
risen
way better.
past where we were. That's good. But you're also a flyer.
I am.
Not like a fly fisherman, not like you zip your fly. I guess that you do that also.
I do.
But
Most
you
of
also
the time.
fly in the sky.
Yes,
so
airplanes.
How did you become a flyer of airplanes?
Man, it was always a dream of mine, and I finally got, when COVID happened and everybody kind of went on their own way, I was like, I got some time. I think I'm going to do this, and jumped in, got my pilot's license, and finished my instrument rating a couple months ago, and just kind of continue going forward. It's pretty fun.
Well, that makes us feel bad about what we accomplished during COVID.
Yeah, but now I get to fly with him.
There you go.
Which is pretty big because I don't like flying, but I've flown with him and I can verify that he's a good pilot. Tyler Dixon, however, might disagree. we had a bumpy flight with Tyler, but that's a story for another day.
Oh, yeah, there's still sunflower seeds in that plane.
Oh, awkward. Well, hey, Chris has been doing student ministry for a long time in a lot of different places, and so Chris is not as old as we may let on, but you've been doing it for long time in several different places. And Chris, one of the things that you talk about sometimes is apologetics and discipleship, and how every student can be equipped to share their faith, know their faith, and live their faith.
Right.
And so would you just kind of flesh that out? Like, how have you seen that apologetics are increasingly important in discipleship?
What's so funny, especially when you think about college, it seems like the first thing that some professors set out to do is really unravel and get you out of your faith.
Yeah.
And so I feel like as student ministry, we have 7 years, 6 years, depending on when student ministry starts, to really prepare you for what to expect. And I'll be honest with you, in student ministry, one of the things that's become hard is a lot of parents are not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's a part of it where it's our job to do that, because when you get off into college, we want you to be prepared for anything that somebody's going to come up and say to you, especially a professor. How do you react when you're challenging your faith? Because we can get really mad about it. We can get, where we want to be very defensive and even offensive in kind of how we respond. But also, how do you, when you are responding in love and not just in anger, but when you are responding, how do you do so in a way that leaves little room for argument? So that's one of the things when you talk about discipleship, when you're preparing students how to launch into life, you need to put apologetics right in the middle of it.
That's interesting. You said leaves little room for argument, because I think that's something that, we're getting increasingly tired of arguing about things.
No doubt.
And apologetics and defending your faith doesn't have to be an argument. It doesn't have to be an all-out brawl.
Right.
So what are some of the biggest questions that you find that students need to be able to answer as they go to that next phase of life?
I think the biggest one is, how do you handle when somebody walks up and says God's not real?
Yeah.
How do you handle that mentally? How do you handle it socially? How do you go about, and again, not necessarily having an argument, but having a conversation? How do you get prepared? So a lot of times with students, whenever they're questioned in their faith, they're going to come to you and say, okay, hey, my teacher said this. They said that creation, that never happened. There's no way creation happened. So how do I go in and how do I respond to my teacher? And a lot of times the students, what I've realized, especially in student ministry, and probably in college ministry too, but especially student ministry, is they're not looking for an answer that's going to be just a definitive answer to the whole thing, but instead they're looking, first of all, how do I respond to this teacher?
Yep.
How do I go in and argue with them? Because they sometimes they want to argue. It goes back to that defensive, or even offensive type. But the second thing is, a lot of times there's students who also have that same doubt.
Yeah.
And so when they get questioned in that, it's not just a question of going and responding, but also, how do I personally respond to this? Is what you said about the Bible, is that really true? Mm-hmm. Or is there some room there for me to even doubt my own faith as well?
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that you said that I think is key is, in student ministry, we have students, ideally we have students for 6 to 7 years.
Yeah.
You can't teach them everything, and let's be honest, they don't remember everything that we say, even if we're the best teacher ever. But by giving them something and having those apologetic conversations, even if they maybe forget or they don't know everything and they come up with questions later, you've given them a resource to come back to.
Yeah, that's a good word.
And they know that there are adults who, not just conspiracy theorists. These are well-reasoned adults that have good arguments for reasonably believing in the truth claims of the Bible, the truth claims of Jesus. That are faith leaders that aren't just morons or goofy or whatever. These are people who have shown them real reasons to believe in the things that they believe in.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good word.
And if you look at the highest percentage of people who leave the church, typically it's right after high school.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is because people have not been really talked into their faith. We've shared Bible stories, and we should. We got to continue to share Bible stories.
But you said talked into their faith. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's easy to talk somebody out of their faith, and they've never been talked into, and they don't truly believe what's really going on. Now, I would love to tell you that I came up with that quote, but honestly, it was Frank Turek who came up with that quote.
Okay.
And but Frank does a great job of explaining. He said, we as Christians, especially as mentors, we've got to be teaching people, first of all, what do we believe? Why do we believe it? But even more importantly, how do we defend what we believe? How do we share it in a way that, not necessarily to argue, but how do we share it in a way where others see that our faith is real?
Yeah.
And I don't know that sometimes we don't kind of fail to miss that mark. I mean, we don't really do a great job always as pastors of teaching those things and really talking people into what we believe.
So I think all of us and most people listening to this podcast would agree that apologetics are important. We agree that apologetics are important. What are some ways that you've seen that you've helpfully implemented apologetics into the discipleship process of maybe a student small group that you have, or even young adults or adults that you have a Bible study with? How can we better engage apologetics in discipleship? Because there's a lot of stuff we've got to teach.
Right.
A lot of us feel a burden to preach through books of the Bible, teach the stories of the Bible. Where do you find time? Where's the right place to really put apologetics in discipleship?
That's a great question. And one of the things, of course, you work with me, so you kind of know a lot of what we do as well.
Yeah.
It's always like, how do we go younger? One of the things we're doing right now with our high school seniors is during our 940 life group hour, we have several different studies going on within the life group. Right now, they're going through Frank Turek's book, Not Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, which if you're listening to this and you have questions, I strongly encourage you grab that book. It's an easy read. It's not necessarily a small book, but it's an easy reading book. And then, another great book is Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, which is about a Muslim who gave his life to Christ, and it did not happen overnight. It happened over years of conversations and relationships and things, but is a great tool for us when it comes to defending our faith, because he goes through a lot of why we believe. So that's one of the books, too, that we also use with those high school seniors. And then there's several other things we're going to go through. We'll eventually go through stewardship. We'll go through there's a book by David Platt. I'm totally drawing a blank on the name, but
the counterculture.
Counterculture. Thank you. Yes, and so we're going to be going through that as well. Great. You need to know what the Bible says about what we believe, but also how we live too. And so it's going to go through some of that. I think where we have struggled in student ministry at First Rogers, and something we're trying to get better at, is how do we start even younger? And me and Brock had lunch with Jay Warner Wallace a couple years ago, and he challenged me.
I ate food. Chris got to talk to him.
Brock still gives me a hard time because Jay Warner Wallace talked to me the whole time. Great guy. Absolutely loved hanging out
We're
with him.
excited because he's going to be at Lead Defend in 2022. So
Yes.
if you're not planning on coming, leaddefend.org and find a way to be there.
Jay Warner Wallace, if you're listening to this, I want another shot to have a conversation with you at lunch.
Hey, we'll interview him on the podcast this coming 2022, so it'll be a good time.
But he wrote the book Cold Case Christianity, in case you're wondering who Jay Warner Wallace is. But he challenged me. He said, if you're waiting to their senior year, you've waited too long.
Wow.
He said the average student is probably already checked out of their faith by the time they're 13 or 14 years old.
Even if they're still
scary.
attending, they're mentally checked out.
They've left
Yes.
the church before they've left church.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're looking at ways, I think probably moving forward, we're looking at how we train our parents. And let's just be realistic. Students are going to gain a lot more from their parents than they are us.
Yeah.
So much more influence.
Way more influence. And they're going to trust their parents. And there's a lot more to be said about that. So we're wanting to train parents how to teach apologetics, how to teach, really what their family believes, why faith is important to their family. And it's in a world where everything's being challenged.
Yeah.
I mean, let's COVID proved one thing to us. A lot of people checked out of church because they were scared to death of a virus that God had under control anyway.
Yeah.
And again, I understand there was a time we kind of all had to pull back to figure out what was going on. That's just wisdom. But look at how many people still haven't come back because it's not that important. And sports and everything else. I mean, we let a whole lot of stuff get in the way of the priority of church. And that plays even into a parent when you go to train your child and you're trying to bring them up in their faith and you're trying to teach them what you believe, they're also going to watch you. Mm-hmm. Don't tell me something's important and then go live the other way. And I think that's something that we want to help our parents understand, help them walk through that. And none of us are perfect at it. I mean, I'm a parent. Sometimes I wonder, do I stink as a spiritual leader of my family? And I want to get better even myself. So it's a great way just to start reaching them even at a younger age.
Yeah. Every parent's discipling their kids in something. The question is, what are they discipling them in?
That's a big word.
And one of the things I'm excited about Lead Defend this year is Lead Defend Foundations, because our Lead Defend team has seen the importance of starting those conversations earlier, and we're going to give an opportunity for middle school students to come and get the experience of Lead Defend down at the City Center at Emmanuel Baptist Church.
That's going to be huge. And I can't get that phrase out of my mind, a student being talked into their faith. And so let's say there's a middle school, high school student listening right now, and they're saying, I don't know that I've ever been talked into my faith. I've grown up in this church environment. I've heard all the Bible stories because I go on Sunday mornings. But what questions do they need to be asking so that they can be talked into their faith?
I think the first one is just, why do I believe this?
Yeah.
Why am I in church?
Or do I believe this?
Do I believe it? That's a great question. Ask those questions, but don't just stop there. And that's where I get so frustrated. People who I'm an atheist or whatever. It's like, how much have you really looked into it?
Yeah, because that's a bold claim.
It's a very bold claim.
A consequential claim.
Yes. But so many times people have never really studied what they believe anyway. So they don't know. So, I'm just going to adopt the fact that God doesn't exist because I can't explain God.
A lot of people are really mad at a God that they don't believe in.
Wow.
That's right.
Brock, that's gold. They're mad at a God they don't even believe in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true.
And typically when you really challenge somebody to study what they believe, if they're saying they don't believe in God, typically they're going to come to the conclusion, hey, I've got to at least say there's a God. If you want to claim evolution's how we got here, go study evolution for a minute, because it's a theory at best. We can't prove anything with evolution.
We did a great podcast with Bill Newton on that. Go check it out if you haven't got a chance to listen to that, because Bill did a great job unpacking some of the flaws with evolution.
Yeah.
So a student can start asking those questions, like, what do I believe? Why do I believe what I believe? And let's say they're not around a place where they can get great resources.
Gotcha.
Like they're the church, and the pastor preaches Bible story sermons, and they're incredible. But you've mentioned some books that they can continue reading. But who are some people they can talk to about these things? Because you mentioned how, hey, professors are not always good sources.
Right. So a great source is Frank Turek's podcast that he does, Not Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, where he actually sits in rooms full of college students, high school students, and actually goes and lets them ask questions.
Yeah.
It's easy to listen to. It's easy to watch. And it's a small book called More Than a Carpenter, where Josh McDowell set out to really disprove Jesus. Like, that was the whole reason he was doing it, and it backfired on him.
Wow.
Because he gave his life to Christ. And again, J. Warner Wallace, another great, he was a homicide detective in California and decided to use everything he knew about being a detective to disprove Christianity. And again, it backfired. That's where his book, Cold Case Christianity, comes in. Those are great. I would encourage you to, if you're a student listening to this and you're struggling in your faith, you have a lot of questions, sit down with your campus pastor.
Yeah.
Sit down with your church pastor. I mean, we love having these conversations.
Absolutely.
We love getting to talk through this. We don't know all the answers, and so there's going to be times that we may look at you and go, I don't know, but I'll find out. And that's just part of who we are. We don't know all the answers, but at least have those conversations. Don't just assume that you were right in saying God does not exist, or that, as our pastor says, some fuzzy-headed professor says, you were right, and in saying that God doesn't exist, because you need to at least go look at what that means.
I think sometimes, Chris, a lot of people are afraid to ask the questions.
Yeah.
Not because they're afraid of what the answer will be, but because they're afraid of the questioning process. Like,
Yeah.
I'm afraid that when I ask the question, people are going to judge me, or, if everybody in this room doesn't have this question, like, am I out of place?
Yeah.
So do y'all have a word for that student who's like, I have these questions, but I'm really hesitant to ask?
You're not the first one.
No.
Wow.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. 3 of us sitting here right now, we probably all had those same doubts as well. I know I have, and I don't think I'm the only one at the table that has. I have doubted before, and I've wondered, all right, am I believing a total hoax?
And just because you don't know everything or can't know everything doesn't mean that there's not some things that we can definitively know.
That's right.
So there are some things that people have been arguing about within Christendom, Christianity for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we can have disagreements on those things, but there are some things that are definitively true that we can know. Don't let what is a question mark overshadow what is a emphatic exclamation point or a period. And
I think for me, it was really healthy as a late teenager. I came to faith at 14 or so, but as a late teenager, it was healthy to me knowing, hey, God is okay with being questioned. Not in an accusatory way, but God's okay with me exploring who He is and just really asking those questions. When I came to faith in Jesus, I literally just knew that God's Son came, lived, died, and rose again.
Yeah.
And I believed in that. So I was taught in high school evolution, so that was still kind of what I believed,
right,
because I just knew I believed Jesus.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started asking more questions that I realized there's really more to my whole worldview that needs shaping because of who God is. So,
Chris, one, do you have something to add to that?
Well, I was going to say, one book to all that, a lot of times people, especially intellectual students, and I know there's going to be some intellectuals that really, like to dig in deep on some of this stuff.
Yep.
Another great resource is Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Sean McDowell and Josh McDowell.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a textbook. I'm not going to lie. That joker's, it's huge. But he goes into so many details in that if you're willing to really study it, it's worth looking into, especially as a college student, just to kind of see, hey, here is why this is written. And it goes through manuscript evidence. It goes through physical evidence. It goes through historical evidence. I mean, it really looks deep into why we can know, how we can know that God does exist.
That's big.
And it was a really a life changer for me when I actually looked into that book and realizing, hey, it's not just my faith that shows that God exists. It's so much more. Mm-hmm. Creation screams it.
Chris, one final question. As we're thinking of all these different things, what might you say in a world, especially social media, online, deconstructionism is booming right now?
Yeah.
Hopefully something as we emphasize the importance of apologetics, the truth, that will begin to decline. But what would you maybe say to the student who's seeing all these even famous former Christians deconstructing, they're thinking, what do I really think about this? Maybe it's just time to give all this up. What do you say to those students tonight?
One of the things that I would, first of all, you talk about Christians who are now, saying that God doesn't exist. Realistically, they were probably never Christians.
Yeah.
They got caught up in student ministry, something that looked beautiful and all this stuff, and they, just never really truly trusted in Jesus. So I'm gonna throw that out there, and there's probably gonna be somebody listening to this going, "Oh, that wasn't very fair." But
I think that's a helpful distinction.
It is, absolutely,
because there's. Truthfully, most people are saying they walked away from something they never truly walked into.
The Bible says they went out from us because they were not of us.
Yeah. Yep. And I think about when Jesus said, "Some will come to me saying, Lord, Lord," and I'll say, "Depart from me, I never knew you." Yeah. And those are people who screamed about God, who were in church every Sunday and things. And you think even the Pharisees and Sadducees, they were in church all the time. They're very religious people. And so religion does not equal Christianity. And that's something to think about. The other thing that I would say in that too is don't be afraid to have conversations with those people.
Yeah.
Maybe not on Facebook comments, but maybe through Messenger. I've learned that if you're going to have conversations with these types of people, you're way better off doing it privately than as a public. Eventually, you may make them feel stupid, and they're going to come retaliate and be pretty hard on you.
Well, and the truth is, they're putting this out there because they feel like they have a story to tell, and they're looking for engagement with it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only reason we post the things on social media. And so I think students who have friends who are going through this process, sometimes they just mention things or put things out there that's like they're looking for conversation.
Yeah.
But so oftentimes it's taboo that we don't engage well when the opportunity arises. So yeah, it's good stuff. All right, any final word, Chris?
Man, guys, don't be afraid to study your faith. I mean, just get in, have conversations with pastors. But also, I would say when it comes to looking for answers, don't use Google.
Yeah, wow.
Listen,
wow.
if you Google a lot of Christian things, there's a few good resources that pop up, but one of the top ones are Mormon ads.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, or just some trash.
Yep.
That people
Yeah.
are paying for ads just to throw confusion and doubt. Chris Roller, an avid adventurer in all things the sky. Brock's boss and student pastor at First Baptist Rogers. He's still the student pastor at First Baptist Rogers, Brock. So,
Even if Brock says that he is.
even if Brock claims the title. Hey, thank you so much for being on with us and all that stuff. And Chris is going to be at Lead Defend 2022. And so
Absolutely.
he's excited to see you there. Lead Defend Foundations, March 5th. It's going to be a great time. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.
See ya.
That's it for this episode of Lead Defend. To hear more episodes from the Lead Defend crew, visit absc.org/podcasts. If you liked what you heard, rate and review us on your favorite podcast listening site. Want to learn more information about the next Lead Defend conference? Visit leaddefend.org.